Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics. Very busy week on the presidential level as well as at the state. But the main story of the week, and why we're very glad to have the opinion maker panel we have here for the full half hour, Mayor Slay decided to forego re-election. And this week on the opinion maker panel, get right into it, we're joined by Sarah Rossi with the ACLU for the first time. Glad to have you on.
Thank you.
Friend of the show, Mindy Mazur, very glad to have you with us.
Glad to be back, thanks.
For the first time, Aaron Baker of Axiom Strategies, very glad to have you on, sir. Welcome to This Week in Missouri Politics.
Glad to be here.
And the guest we wanted to have on more than any other this week, returning Jeff Rainford, former Chief of Staff to Mayor Slay. I consider you the first St. Louis, and very glad to have you here.
Thanks, Scott.
Had to be fun to see the way the mayor went out at the top of his game, 2 huge wins, and see the coverage even from his enemies was a lot of respect for the work he did.
I think it's probably especially his enemies know what a formidable leader he is and what a formidable political force he is. They're probably really glad that he's out of the way for their own, for what they want to accomplish. I think he will go down in history as the best mayor the city has ever had, and certainly the best mayor in the TV era. People probably won't remember who the other mayors are. I mean, people may not remember in 2000 how much on the wrong track, off the right track the city was. There were neighborhoods given up for dead. There were buildings given up for dead. There's probably been $8 to $10 billion in new private investment in the city. There are neighborhoods coming back. You have, things like Cortex that have taken a very long time to bring together. But he also did things for ordinary citizens. His office, our office, started 20 charter schools. We had summer jobs program. Thousands of African American low-income kids got a summer job. Lead poisoning was a scandal when the mayor took office. Went from 23% of the kids whose brains were poisoned by lead down to less than 3%. And you can go on and on about that. He led the city through the worst economy since the Great Depression. Cities like Detroit and other cities went into bankruptcy. Not only did the city of St. Louis get through it, but its credit rating actually improved after going through that. We can go on and on. He was a leader on gay marriage. He's been a leader on the charter school movement. For the first time since the Civil War, he got the city police department back under local control from state control. The firefighters are the most popular people in the city of St. Louis. He believes they're popular, but he took them on in order to save the city's budget and made significant reform to their pensions. So he did big things, he did moderate things, and he did things that never made the news that changed the lives of ordinary citizens.
I mean, there's a lot of things that people from outstate Missouri come to know St. Louis by, Central West End, Washington Avenue, or things that were developed, cultivated, highlighted during his time. I think he did change the city and the state.
I think he did too, and one of the things that I was particularly happy with Mayor Slay and his leadership is when he launched an appointments project with the Women's Foundation to get more women appointed to boards and commissions and try and reduce that gender gap in terms of leadership. And so that was really great to see as well. And I'm hoping in his last year, which he says is going to be a fun year, that he appoints many more women.
Well, including Mr. Rainford's replacement, Mary Ellen Ponders, as Chief of Staff.
Yeah, she's awesome.
Right, so he named the first woman who served as the airport director, the first woman who was the equivalent of our public safety director. We call it the president of the Board of Public Service, the first female city councilor, the first female chief of staff. You can go down the list. And the same thing, by the way, within the African American community with inclusion. The mayor went out and got the very best people, regardless of who they were, to make a contribution to our city. And he believes that the city is a much more diverse place probably than a lot of the other places people who are watching this show live. And he actually always believed that was a strength of the city as long as you were mindful of it and mindful of the ways that you govern and lead.
Mm-hmm. Sarah Rossi, when you think throughout St. Louis history, Mayor Tucker, Mayor Keel, Mayor Shamel even, it seems like Francis Slay will set at the top of that list of greatest mayors.
I mean, our experience with Mayor Slay is probably a little more limited than the rest of the guests on the panel, but I will say that he always was willing to listen to us and talk to us about racial justice and policing in St. Louis. He was always very open to having those conversations, and I hope whoever replaces him picks up that torch and runs with it.
Aaron Baker, Jeff makes a point. I'm an outstate Republican myself, but I was a mayor once. He was a leader, and he was somebody that was not hated in Jefferson City as a big city mayor. You would think they would be. He commanded a lot of respect there. How do you think he'll be remembered?
That's right. And Missouri is stronger when St. Louis is stronger. And so he has big shoes to fill, but there are also issues ahead, such as crime and making Missouri and St. Louis a safer place to live. I think it's going to be a tough job and tough shoes to fill, and he's done a very good job.
Speaking of tough shoes to fill, Jeff Rainford, we've seen the list. It starts with Sam Dotson. You have the police chief. Greg Daly has a lot of money on hand. Tashara Jones has talked about. Lewis Reed says he's running. Jamil Nashi, the state senator, that a lot of our viewers don't know, can raise a lot of money. Lyda Crewson. Where do you see the race at now?
Well, right now, first of all, this is the first open primary for mayor in the city of St. Louis since 1993, so it's been 24 years, so I don't even know if we know how to do it. So what I do worry about a little bit is if the field stays crowded, what I would like to see is at least one candidate try to run citywide, north, south, black, white, men, woman, young, old, and not have 8 people segment the electorate and get elected by.
Possible?
It's very possible, likely if everybody stays in there. Because it is possible that somebody like Lyda Crewson, maybe even Chief Dotson, could run citywide. But what I hope doesn't happen is that all 8 of them try to find some demographic group to appeal to and win only with that demographic group and then try to govern. It is extraordinarily hard. One of the reasons we've had so many one-term mayors in this city's history is we have what's known as a weak, strong mayor form of government. The mayor does not have that much direct power. And if you don't have a mandate or if you don't have support of the majority of the people of the city of St. Louis governing, it'll eat that future mayor alive. So I hope we do that. Whatever happens, whether the field gets smaller or one candidate emerges and tries to run citywide, I hope that there's somebody who wins with enough of support and enough of a mandate that he or she can govern.
Mindy, Mazur, a statistic that I've seen since the mayor said he wasn't running again, the electorate's roughly a little more than 60% white, but it's younger. And it's very, very forward, very progressive. Do you see it possible to run with that base and an African-American base in North City and South City being older voters? It seems like it's very segmented.
Well, sure, the electorate is segmented maybe in terms of those sorts of demographics, and there are some real issues there. But I think that certainly what we're going to want to see is somebody coalesce behind the leader who can draw support from all the different constituencies and move everybody forward in St. Louis, because there's so much opportunity in the city. Mayor Slay has a great legacy, but there's so much more in the future of St. Louis, and some of these folks that you've mentioned, I think Tashara Jones is certainly a rising star, and has been for some time. Lyda Crewson has a great reputation as well. A lot of these candidates, I think, have the ability to appeal across these different demographic factors and bring folks together and lead them forward.
Sarah Rossi, the candidates that have called me and the consultants that know about the city, they say voters that you would represent in the ACLU, folks that you work with, will probably have been the swing voters in the past, and that's the growing population in the city. What will folks like your members look for in a mayoral candidate?
They're going to look for somebody who speaks out vocally and loudly for civil rights, and that's not just the rights of African American members of the St. Louis community, but LGBT members as well. We've seen constant attacks on both the Black community and the gay community, both at the legislative level and locally. And we need to make sure that the candidate for mayor that's going to speak the loudest for our constituents, ACLU constituents, and frankly for people of my age and younger, and LGBT people and African Americans, we need to see them speak loudly on behalf of those folks.
And that's a great point, because Francis Lay was always thought of as a conservative South Side Catholic, and yet he himself, I was there when it happened, he himself officiated over the first gay weddings in the city of St. Louis. He has 2 gay siblings. Same thing, he was the first one to put forward and put in place a civilian review board for our police department. So sometimes people get typecast that they're a certain way and yet can break through and represent the entire city. And that's really what I hope happens with the next mayor.
Aaron Baker, there's always been a fondness since the Republicans came in for Mayor Slay. They took over the House early last decade. Many speakers of the House have said while Mayor Slay's delivered the State of the City address, what does the candidate need to do to continue that relationship? Because I think it is important for the city to grow, to maintain a good relationship with Jeff City.
Well, it's going to be hard because sometimes it's easy to fall into that division between the city and the rest of the state, and it's going to be hard for someone to run and say that they're a uniter. I guess after they're elected, they can be one. But we talked a lot about the division and the different demographics that you could go after. It's going to be natural for these candidates to try to find one base. If they don't have one single base geographically or by race, it's going to be pretty hard.
My assumption is the base that wins will not be a base that will view the Missouri legislature friendly.
It's going to be very hard. It's going to be very hard. And I feel like if race and geography don't matter, that Tashara Jones would be a very, very good candidate.
Jeff, I'll just, you knew I was going to ask you, do you have a favorite yet?
I don't, and I want to see, again, like a lot of people, I want to see what the final field looks like. And I think some of this will be self-selected. You will see some candidates self-destruct. You will see some candidates decide not to run. And I kind of would like to see how it all plays out. But I am looking for and expect, and I think the mayor probably will too, to support the candidate that at least, maybe they will not get votes throughout the city, but at least that people throughout the city will support him or her as mayor versus somebody who's going to segment the city.
When you pick a favorite, would you let us know here on This Week in Missouri Politics?
You'll be the first to know.
Sarah Rossi, we talked about the mayor's legacy, and I think one of the endearing things will be the photograph of him presiding over the first gay marriage in the city. Mm-hmm. That discussion is still going on, except in a different form at the state capitol of SGR 39. Right. You gave some powerful testimony. This is a bill that the supporters of it call it religious freedom, the opponents of it call it homophobic, targeting different groups. It would basically say that certain businesses could choose not to participate in a gay wedding, could discriminate against different customers. I thought the testimony was very powerful. I thought Representative Haar did a very good job running a fair meeting. You gave some very powerful testimony. Give us an update on where it is.
So it's still in the Emerging Issues Committee, likely coming up for a vote sometime next week. We're working hard to talk to those representatives about why they should vote no on SJR 39. It's not just wedding vendors that could decline business or decline service to lesbian and gay couples. It's pretty much every type of social service, which is what I talked about in my testimony. It's adoption services, foster care, elder care, hospice services, domestic violence. It's all of these services that are meant to help people. And when lesbian and gay couples go to those places and ask because they're in need of those services, they can be rejected on the basis of who they're married to. So it's actually a very broad thing, and it's a constitutional amendment, which is just above and beyond how far anything should go when it comes to LGBT people. It enshrines discrimination in our Constitution. It will be very difficult to remove it if it passed on the ballot.
Mindy, on the hashtag Moledge podcast, the Missouri Times does, Ron Hicks thought it was the swing vote. I think Representative Zare, Representative Rowden are likely knows 3 Democrats on the committee of 12 people. He came out and said he was voting for it. So it seems likely this week it passes, moves on to the House. I think, though, what you saw was a surprising amount of business leaders come out on this.
Absolutely.
And I think that may be the thing that comes away from that hearing.
Absolutely. And as you see in some of these other states who've passed discriminatory laws in the recent years, the business community is against it, and they actually start putting their money where their mouth is. So in North Carolina recently, after Governor McCrory, he actually had to backtrack within weeks. And you would think that some of our leaders in the legislature would take note of what's happening in these other states. PayPal pulled out of a new expansion in North Carolina because of their discriminatory law. Bruce Springsteen canceled a concert recently. You see, yeah, exactly. You see Governor Pence in Indiana taking a lot of heat. It's becoming a major issue in his reelection campaign. He got booed at the baseball game the other day. It's crazy, I think, frankly, that this is the priority of our legislators right now. It's a divisive issue. It's something that doesn't move the state forward, and it's a handful of zealots on a crusade when we could be spending time bringing Missourians together to do things that can help everybody.
And that, I mean, the business opposition, you know, we tried to talk about in that hearing how it affects people on a human level. Mm-hmm. And the business opposition is just as important. And the fact that it was called bullying by the sponsor and the sponsor supporters is just the most ironic thing I've ever heard in my life, when gay kids and trans kids are killing themselves every day after being bullied. That's bullying.
Isn't it ironic that businesses are choosing not to do business with folks they don't agree with, but yet that's the very thing that's being opposed here?
You know, I thought, though, no one was surprised to see Sarah there giving a very impassioned testimony. The business opposition has got to be more than anybody suspected, right?
Well, I think the Republican Party obviously looks at what business is saying, but they also look at what social conservatives say. And I think in Missouri, social conservatives are kind of the lead in the party, and I think that you're going to continue to see that, and this will pass.
One thing that I've seen is the bill sponsor, Senator Onder, is a good man. I mean, he has a passionate disagreement. Right. To him, this is about protecting somebody. Right. And a little bit lost in this, I think, is it's easy to cover the opposition in a 40-hour filibuster because for most of the 40 hours, the opposition's talking. Right. But he is a good person, good senator, will be a leader in the state. I think that he was been surprised by the business opposition, though.
The Missouri proposal isn't as stringent as some of the other states that have been mentioned. It's laser focused on just marriage vendors that are involved. Is the disagreement that opponents and supporters have.
Before we go to the break, does this bill get amended or does it go to the ballot like it is?
If it passes, it's going to have to pass quickly. So
Does it
I don't
pass?
think it gets
Does it pass
amended.
at the ballot box?
Yes.
I think it does.
Yeah,
Jeff,
absolutely.
does this pass if it gets put before the voters in Missouri?
Yeah, it probably passes, but that's why we have a Bill of Rights. Is we've decided in this country that the majority can't trample on the rights of the minority. So just we don't have majority rules. That's what happens when you have a club in the 5th grade and you're building a fort. Majority rules. In America, we have a Bill of Rights so that the majority cannot violate the rights of a minority.
Does the majority of Missouri voters vote for this if given the opportunity?
Yeah, I think that they will, but I think that it will end up getting overturned in court. I think it's going to do damage to our state. It's divisive. And what we really ought to be focusing on, especially Republicans, is why all these Trump voters are angry about the economics of what's going on in their lives.
After the break, but Mindy, does this pass if it were the ballot?
I certainly hope not.
Does it pass if it gets to the ballot? Does it pass?
If it passes, the cost of the state's going to be piled onto by the amount they're going to have to spend on litigation.
And we'll get right back to talking about the politics of this issue and everything else coming in 2016 after our break. But first, we'll leave you this week's Leading Missouri Economic Indicators.
All across Missouri, our new car and truck dealers are building strong local economies. When you buy a car or truck in Missouri, you're helping to support over 20,000 Missouri families who rely on the auto industry for good-paying local jobs. You're also helping fund our communities, schools, first responders, and our roads because dealers generate millions of dollars in tax revenue. Missouri's automobile dealers have been the foundation of our communities for generations and for generations to come. The Missouri Automobile Dealers Association, the heart of Missouri.
For more than a century, the St. Louis Carpenters Union has shaped our communities. Through trusted alliances, we deliver skilled professional craftspeople while our business partners provide the kind of quality jobs that keep our economy humming. It's a blueprint that has worked since 1882. Turning Missouri into a right-to-work state stalls progress, wipes out jobs, and kills momentum. Right to work is wrong for everyone. Let's keep Missouri moving forward. Visit carpdc.org to learn more.
Welcome back this week of Missouri Politics, one of our favorite kind of shows, the Opinion Maker panel for the full half hour. And for the second half of the show, we're going to talk politics. Mindy, the governor's race. It's the funnest governor's race to cover, I think, in most of our lifetimes, right? Out of the box, SGR 39, you mentioned. Peter Kinder testifies in favor of it. Koster, I think the one place you can see he's kind of evolved with a lot of the rest of the state on these issues. Will this be an issue that translates to November?
Well, I certainly think it will be if it's on the ballot, absolutely, but I think it will no matter what. And what's going to be interesting to see is if all of the gubernatorial candidates are going to stake out a position on it, because it seems like maybe, has Grayton said anything yet about this issue?
Not that I know of.
I don't think he gets that deep into policy.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean,
Someone say he doesn't spend enough time in Missouri to know. So.
Well, perhaps not, but I mean, we definitely know where Lieutenant Governor Kinder is on it.
Indeed.
He's very vocal on that, and I think the other candidates maybe have come out in support of it as well on the Republican side. But you know, I think at the end of the day, it's Kinder's race to lose still on the primary in the GOP primary. I think he's got the best app. So what more do you need, right?
Quality app.
But actually, he's got the name ID, and there's a lot of folks in the primary, and they're all doing significant fundraising, some more out of state than others. But it's going to take a lot of money to overcome that name advantage, I think.
Mm-hmm. And Baker, yeah, I know you're working on the Hanaway campaign. The race right now, it does. How do you respond to people that say, "Well, Peter has won these things"?
Sure.
The state has elections every 4 years, and by God, Peter wins one every 4 years. Where do you see the race at? How do you see people that say, "How would you beat Kinder?"
Well, we don't have the Kinder Tinder app. First of all, we just don't. We don't have the app yet. But I go to these County Lincoln Days. There are 75 of them around the state. A fundraiser banquet. You sit shoulder to shoulder to the rubber chicken dinner. And those rank and file Republicans, the county chairs, the sheriff, the county commissioners, they remember Catherine Hanaway as the architect of the red state takeover. They remember her being the one that came and helped their state rep win at that time. And there's a lot of loyalty to her amongst the rank and file Republicans throughout the state. Her campaign is fundamentally, they are out doing the right things right now. And I think that whenever you look at what the state needs, starve for leadership, but also go back to economic development, fundamentally people want to live and work in a safe place, and businesses want to come to a safe place. And right now the crime issue is really important to Missourians, and Catherine's the only one with prosecutor experience that's tough on crime.
Jeff Rainford, you've seen a lot of these races come and go, maybe not one quite this interesting to watch. The national ticket, how will it affect that? And how do you think Donald Trump affects
Well, I think there's a couple of things. First, in the primary, I think it will be, with all the attention on the presidential going on, it'll be difficult for these gubernatorial candidates
convention in July.
Yeah,
That's right.
to break through, and I think that's to Peter's advantage because he's the best known. I think if it's either Trump or Cruz, I think Chris gets an added 6 to 8 point boost, and what should be a 2 to 3 point race becomes an 8 to 9 point race, and I think it'll be very difficult for the
setting that bar awful high.
Well, I think it'll be very difficult. If Peter hasn't, if people aren't focusing on Peter, he gets no bump, no increased support other than within his own caucus, within the Republicans, because nobody's paying attention to him. And you've got Chris Koster, who's like loading up the money, and then you've got the drag of Donald Trump on the ticket. I think it's all to the Democrats' advantage. And Democrats, even in Missouri, do better in presidential years because the turnout is a lot different with more younger voters and minority voters.
Are you seeing a difference in, I'm an ACLU member myself and a Republican.
Hey.
You guys sue the government. I love it. It's not picking on other people. Trump is really, I think, doing a great service to the country in the fact that he's talking about economic issues and he's getting away. I have a pastor, great guy. You want somebody that'll cut taxes. That's the one thing. I went to the hearing. When is the tax cut hearing here? I mean, we're worried about these things that just who cares? Nobody cuts taxes. Are you seeing a Trump effect, even in your membership, of some people in the Republican Party being less focused on some things you'd oppose?
I think that within our constituency, the Trump effect has been to move them further and further away from him. Our members and our constituents care about immigration rights. They care about racial justice. They care about First Amendment and free speech rights. They don't like seeing protesters pepper sprayed outside of Trump rallies. They don't like the rhetoric Trump uses around immigrants and calling them criminals and rapists. They don't like protesters wearing hijab being kicked out of Trump rallies.
But
that doesn't play well.
Civil
That
Liberties
doesn't play
Union
well.
probably doesn't like protesters trying to keep a person from speaking either, right?
That's the thing about protesting. The thing about speech is the only way to combat speech is with more speech. So if somebody's speaking very loudly and you don't like what they're saying, you protest even more loudly to drown them out. That's the principle of free speech.
I think most Missourians, I believe Cruz is probably on point to win until Kansas City. And there's when you try to shut down somebody's event, a private event, I don't think that sets well with anyone. I think that's not how politics should be.
Yeah, but you see it more and more, and with some of these candidates this year, they're really stoking the flames of anger. And so in some ways, it's almost like they're wanting to see this kind of drama. And for Trump, it works out in the form of the exposure that he gets, frankly.
Yeah, I happen to know someone that lived in Eastern Europe under socialism. And it stokes anger in them. They know what it's like to have breadlines. They know what it's like for the government to tell you everything you're going to do in your life. But they don't go try to shut down a Bernie Sanders rally. They don't go try to keep him from saying his socialist message. I think there's a difference in I think any of us here would step in front of somebody if they were protesting on the sidewalk. I would defend their right to the hilt to protest there. When you want a private event and try to stop the event, to me that crosses the line.
But this isn't anything new, really. I mean, every single cycle there are protesters against various candidates and presidential candidates on both sides of the line. So I mean, I think we see more of it now, and I think there have been some candidates who've stoked it. But
I hate to say it, but I'm kind of with you, Scott, in the sense that I think everybody should have a right to have their say. And me not letting you, it's not a violation of the First Amendment because the government violates First Amendment rights. But there's a couple of things about me trying to shout you down. One, I don't think it works. I think independent voters and undecided voters look at that, and most Americans want civil discussion. I don't think anybody who's in a movement who tries to shout down somebody who is exercising their legitimate First Amendment rights, even if it's abhorrent language, don't do themselves any favor. So I think tactically it's a failure. I also think it's wrong. If there was the flip side, if the people who don't like Trump were holding a rally and a bunch of his brown shirts showed up to shout them down, I mean, the reaction would be very, very different. And I think we have to be consistent about allowing everybody, even if we don't like their point of view, allowing everybody to have their say. And by the way, I mean that on the right, too. I mean, we like to think that those of us who are Democrats, that we should protect speech on the left, and the Republicans think we should protect speech on the right. I think we should protect everybody's speech.
Agree.
Including cake bakers.
And it wouldn't be different for the ACLU, regardless of who was doing the shouting and the protesting. If the brown shirts showed up, we would protect their free speech right as well.
Aaron Baker, Hillary Clinton doesn't have to worry about this, right? Because no one seems to care either way about her campaign.
Well, there was some shouting last night.
A little bit, yeah. Give me quick predictions here. Aaron Baker, Bernie Sanders win New York?
No.
Does Ted Cruz, you'll be the person we would have on the show that would know, what percentage chance did you give him to come out of that convention with a nomination?
It's really hard to tell right now with a lot of states ahead, but obviously if it gets to convention, Ted Cruz is the winner.
Jeff Rainford, give me a prediction. Republican primary. Who wins a primary?
I think that on the current trajectory, Peter, but I think I know Catherine, and I should give that disclaimer. I know Catherine and like her, and I think she's going to run a great campaign, and she will be down in the grassroots. It would not shock me if she beat him, but I'd say Peter's a front runner.
I'd say keep an eye on Greitens, Money, and Bruner.
Yeah, they don't seem to. He's doing a good job of fundraising. And I like Eric. I know him, but I don't really think his campaign's been very effective so far.
Just give me a quick prediction. Republican side. Do you think it's still Peter?
oh, I do. Yes, yeah, I do. I think he's
Which one as a Democrat are you more
one.
worried about running against?
Well, I'm not too worried about any of them because I think Chris Koster is the best candidate for the state, and I think he's had a solid campaign thus far. He's raised a lot of money. People know who he is. He doesn't go back and forth on the issues, and he's the strongest candidate. So I think regardless of who the candidate is, he's going to be elected.
Sarah Rossi, I know you don't do politics, but can you give us a prediction on the primary?
Which primary?
And the Republican gubernatorial side.
I'll just say that any candidate who openly advocates for LGBT discrimination is going to have an uphill battle.
I think 3 of them just got knocked out there. I'll leave it right there for this week. I want to thank everybody. Subscribe on iTunes, the hashtag MoLedge podcast. I think you get to learn a lot of stuff like Representative Hicks' vote and how the Emerging Issues Committee will be this week. And until then, we'll leave you for this week with This Week in Missouri Politics.